So in the today's session, we'll see one of the most important topic in TestNG, so which is parameterization. So parameterization means what? We can pass parameters to the test. So suppose in your test, in a class, we can create multiple test methods. So at the runtime, we can pass parameters to the test methods. So which is basically called as parameterization. And the parameterization we can achieve in two different ways. One is using @data provider annotation. One is data provider annotation. So it is also on one of the annotation which we have. So earlier we have seen some of the annotations, like data provider is also one of the annotation. And this is especially used for data-driven testing in TestNG. So we'll discuss that. And the next type of parameterization is using XML file, we can pass parameters to the test methods. Using XML file, we can pass parameters to the test method, and this approach especially used for parallel testing. Parallel testing. Suppose if you want to execute my test case on multiple browsers at the same time, right? So then we can use this approach. Both are comes under parameterization because we are going to pass some parameters to the test method. Okay. And the first one is especially used for data-driven testing. Data-driven testing, because if you have multiple test inputs or multiple test data, and we can pass that to the test method. So for that reason, we can use @data provider for data-driven testing. So both are comes under parameterization concept, but both are totally different. So these two cannot be comparable. So different for data-driven testing, we use data provider annotation in TestNG especially. To perform parallel testing, we will pass the parameters from the XML. Okay. So today we'll discuss both one after another. So first, let us start with the data provider annotation. What is the use of annotation? Data provider. You will get a lot of interview questions on these two concepts. Listen very carefully. I'll cover most of the points. So earlier, we already seen how we can perform data-driven testing using Excel file, right? So we specify the data in the Excel file, and we have written some logic which will read Excel file data. And once you read the data from Excel file, we pass it to the application, and then we capture the some output, right? We have done some validations. So earlier we have done the data-driven testing using Excel file as a source. So in Excel file, we specify the test data, right? And to read the data from the Excel file, like rows and columns, all the data we have to read one after another, and we pass it to the application. For that, what we have done is we have written a looping statement. Only through looping statement, we have achieved it. We have captured the first row data and pass it to the application. Once it is done, then again we have captured another row data, then pass it to the application. So this is the process we continued till all the rows are completed from the Excel file or Excel sheet, right? So there the looping is most important. So without looping, we cannot repeat all the rows and all the cells. But here, the data provider annotation is provide which without using any looping statement. Without using any looping statement, we can execute set of steps multiple times with the different sets of data. So that kind of facility the data provider is provided. So data provider is basically a method which will create some data and pass it to the another test methods, which is called data provider annotation. So let me give you an example. So how we can differentiate data-driven testing earlier we have done. Now how we can do by using data provider annotation. Okay, so earlier we have some data in Excel file. This is our Excel file, and we read this data through your automation script, and we have used a looping statement to read each and every row one after another. And once you read the row, we pass it to the application under test. So this is the process we have done. So this loop set of statements we repeated multiple times because if in each and every iteration we got another row from Excel sheet. So now we will use a different approach. So the approach is, okay, anyway, we'll use Excel file along with the data provider, but how exactly data provider is working? For example, let's say here I have written one test method. Let's say this is our test method. I have written some piece of code, and this is actually doing the test on the application under test. Now, this particular test method requires some test data. And now this test method I want to repeat multiple times without using any looping statement. I do not use any looping statement, but still I want to execute this test method multiple times. Let's say I have written one test for login. And this login test method, I want to repeat multiple times. But at the same time, I don't want to use any looping statement. I just want to repeat this multiple times with the different sets of data. Okay. So for that, we will create one more method like this. And what this method will do is this method will create some test data and pass it to the test method. And this type of method we can specify with data provider method. Data provider. So what is the purpose of this method is this method will prepare some test data and which will return to the test method, another test method in the same class. Now this particular test method will repeat multiple times. Let's say suppose here I'm passing 5 inputs. The data provider method is passing 5 inputs. So the test method will repeat 5 times automatically. So we no need to use any looping statement here. So it depends upon the number of inputs provided by the data provider. Our test method will repeat those many number of times. Here, the looping statement we can avoid. That's the first important point. What is an advantage of using data provider method is first point, we can avoid writing a looping statement. Now the second thing. Earlier, we have done data-driven testing using Excel file, right? Suppose if you have a few inputs or 3 to 5 inputs, we can directly hardcode the data in our data provider method, and that we can return. Let me complete first and then ask the questions. Okay, this is requires a lot of explanation to understand this. All your questions will be clarified. First, listen. Data provider method. Inside the data provider method, we can specify the test data, hardcode data. So for example, if you have a 3 to 4 inputs, we can specify inside the data provider method that you can return. Suppose if you have a huge data, let's say you have a 10 inputs, 20 inputs, 100 inputs, it is not best practice to specify the data inside your code. The code should not contain any data. So we will have an Excel file again. In Excel file, we'll specify the data. Now this data provider method itself having a logic which will read entire Excel data and keep the data in the two-dimensional array. Here, separate logic we need to write inside the data provider method. Okay, if you have a small set of data, you can directly hardcode the data in the data provider method and you can return it to the test method. Suppose if you have a huge data that you can specify in the Excel sheet and read the entire data from Excel, keep it in the two-dimensional array, and that data you can return. This is another way. So here basically we are using both the concepts, using Excel file, using data provider. And earlier we already seen how to read data from Excel file using Excel utility concept, right? Excel utils we have created. That process is same. But earlier how we have done, as soon as you read this particular raw data, immediately we pass it to the application and we have done the testing. But now what we will do is, as soon as we read the rows one by one, each row data we will put inside the two-dimensional array. Once all the data is available in the two-dimensional array, then we will pass the data to the test method, and the test method will repeat multiple times based on the number of inputs. So this is the actual process we follow when you do data-driven testing in our real-time projects. The combination of data provider and Excel sheet. We will use both the combinations. In the last time, we have seen only through Excel file. By writing a looping statement, we have written one for loop in which we have read all the data from Excel and pass it immediately. But now we have created some test method, and this test method we have to repeat multiple times without using looping statement and by taking data from Excel. So this is actual data-driven testing which we are going to do in our frameworks or in our project. Okay. So today's session, I will show you how we can create this data provider method, how it is returning the data to the another test method, how the test method is repeating multiple times. That part we will see. But how exactly data provider get the data from Excel? So this particular logic I will take later. Okay, in the framework, I will explain what exactly it is doing. The end-to-end framework, end-to-end data-driven testing, we will see in the framework concept. But for now, we can just limit to this particular part. How we can create a data provider method, how we can hard code the test data, and how we can pass it to the test method, and how test method will repeat multiple times. So this part we will see now. So this is all about data provider method. So data provider method is a method through which we can pass test data to the another test method. So suppose I have one test method like this, and I will create another method called DP, some data provider method. So I will specify this as a data provider annotation. Data provider annotation we have to specify. And now this data provider method will return the data, and this particular data we can use even single test method or multiple test method. If you have multiple test methods, you can use same data in another test method, one test method two also. And you can also have multiple data provider methods in the single class. One data provider method I can use in one test method. Another data provider will pass data to the another test method. So we can also create n number of test methods, n number of data provider methods in single class. And after that, if you want to still run your test using XML file, you can still run it, no problem. So this is nowhere related to XML file. Data provider is just like a method, like another test method. But the only difference is data provider method will not do any kind of a testing. It will not interact with any application. It will just create some data and provide the data to another test method. That's the only thing the data provider method can do. Okay. So once you created your entire test, you can run through XML also, no problem. Okay. So here the XML will not come into picture. XML is totally different concept. This is not comparable. These two are totally different concepts. Both are comes under parameterization. Parameterization, the meaning is what? We can parameterize the data to the test method. And here through data provider method, we are parameterizing the data. XML file parameterization is different. Okay, I will tell you that one later. First, focus on this. How we can create data provider method, how we can pass the data to the another test. So we'll try to understand this with an example, how we can do data-driven testing using data provider method. And what is the usage of, what is the advantage of using data provider method is we can avoid looping without using any looping statement. If you want to repeat the test method multiple times, you can use data provider annotation method. So let me show you the implementation step by step. Very, very important concept. Now go back to the Eclipse and creating a new package. Day 45. Okay. So inside this class, I'm creating a new, inside the package, I'm creating a new class called data provider demo. Okay, in this, I'm not integrating Excel file. So that logic we'll see later. So we should not take any main method because we are creating the TestNG class. Okay, so inside this data provider, I'm going to create, this is a new class which is created. So I'm going to create a few test methods. So first of all, I'll create one method called setup. In this, I will set up the browser. So I can say void setup, and this I want to execute only one time before starting the test. Okay, so let me create the method first. So I can say void test login. So this is the actual test method. And after that, tear down means I just want to closing all the stuff. So now the setup method, I want to create something like just I want to create a driver instance. I want to launch my browser. So that part I will put inside the setup method. And after that, I will do login. And after that, I will close my browser. That I will put in the tear down method. Okay. So now setup method, I want to execute only once before starting the test methods. Only once. So which annotation we can specify here? Only once I want executing. Which annotation we can specify? Before class, not before test. If you want to say before test, again, we need to go with XML file. we need to specify two test entries. Okay, so just before class. So only one time I want to execute my setup method. So we can say before class annotation. Import this. Now test login is actual test method. So I can say test annotation for this. And teardown method I will execute only once after completion of the login. So which annotation we can specify? After class. After class. Okay, now let us try to implement them. First of all, setup method, login, and teardown method. So in the setup method, I will initiate the driver instance and everything. I will create a driver as a class variable so that I can access through all the methods. WebDriver, driver. Now import this WebDriver. Now this driver I will initiate in the setup method. Driver equal to new Chrome driver. So this will launch our browser. And if you want to put some implicit weight here itself, we can put driver dot manage dot. See, I already told you that annotation, when you create a before class, after class is not mandatory. Okay, if you do not want to do any activity after completion of the test method, then you no need to specify after class, not necessary. Same thing is applicable for other annotations also. We've seen before method, after method, right? So if you create a before method, after method is not compulsory. If you have to execute some method, then you can put there. Otherwise, not necessary. Similarly, before class, after class, before test, after test, before suit, after suit. We will just learn with the combination, but only one annotation also you can specify. Only before class we can specify, or only after class we can specify. It depends on how you are writing the test. Okay, suppose I want to execute few steps before executing the test method. So definitely I can create a before class. Similarly, after completion of the test method, again, I want to execute some more steps as an entry, as an exit. So that you can put in the after class. So it depends on that you can specify. Otherwise, you can avoid, no problem. But most of the times, every test is having some entry, having some exit. Entry means what? Creating the browser, launching the page, launching your application. That is a prerequisite that you can always keep inside the before class. After completion of the test, we will close our application. We will log out from application most of the times, right? That you can put in the after class. So driver.manage.timeouts. Implicitly wait. I can put some time here. Duration dot half seconds as a 10. Okay. So now I just initiated the browser or driver inside the setup method. So this will execute only once. Now in the test login, I will create an actual test through which we can launch our application, login, all the process. Okay, so I will put some piece of code here. So I'm just launching this page. And after that, I'm maximizing the page. And then I'm entering the email address. So for example, here I can say some abc@gmail.com. And here I will pass some password test@123. And here, this is a login I'm clicking. So I think this page you already seen. Let me open this application first. Okay, so this is application I'm just launched. This is again open card application. So here I'm passing email address, password, clicking on the login. So after clicking on the login, then I'm verifying the dashboard page or my account page is displayed or not. This is a my account page is displayed or not. I'm getting the status. And if the status value is equal to true, then I'm clicking on the logout. And also I'm making my test method passed. I'm using assertion here, assert.assert equal to true. Okay, so if I'm getting the my account page after login, what does that mean? My login is passed. So again, if you want to take another input, we have to click on the logout. Then it will come to the login page. Again, you can pass another input. So as soon as the status become true, I'm clicking on the logout and making my test method passed. Suppose if the status value is equal to not true, then I'm making my test method fail. Assert.fail, or you can use assert.assert true is equal to all fail. You can use same statement, but instead of true, you can pass false. Or if you want to directly fail your test method, you can say assert.fail. So this is the test I have created for login. This is the test I have created. Okay, it will launch our application, passing username and password, clicking on the login, capturing the my account text. And if it is a true, then log out from application and make my test method passed. Else make my test method fail. So this is the actual test. So this I want to repeat multiple times with the different sets of email addresses and passwords. Okay. So this is the actual test. Now come to the tier down. In this, I can say driver dot close or quit, whichever you want, you can use. Okay. So this is a way we can create the test. So before class setup method will execute only once, and test login as of now it will execute only once, and tear down also will execute only once. So this is how normally we can create. Okay, now if you pass valid username and valid password, my test will pass. So let me pass a valid username and password. Here I'm passing my, and this email ID and password which is already created earlier in the same application, so I'm using it. Okay, now let me run this, run as TestNG test. Okay, so this is launched my page, and even login is also successful. My test is passed. And as of now, my test method is executing only one time with one set of data which I have passed here. Only one time it executes. First, initially it executes setup method, then test login is got executed, and then tear down, which has automatically closed my page. So as of now, this particular login test method will take only one combination of data, one username and password. Now, my requirement is I want to repeat this login test multiple times with the different sets of data. Okay, I want to login, I want to execute this login test multiple times with the different sets of data. And I'm not going to use any looping statement inside this test login. I don't want to change any code as it is. As of now, are we using any looping statement in this? No, right? There is no looping statement. But still, I want to execute this test method multiple times with the different sets of data. That's my requirement. So this we can achieve through data provider method. Okay, so let's create one data provider method. You can create anywhere in this class. You can create data provider at the beginning or at the end, wherever you want, you can create. Okay, so how to create data provider method? Let me show you. So here I'm going to create one method, which is called data provider method. So I create, just say, for now I can say void login data. So I'm giving some name to login data, and I can make this as a data provider annotation we have to specify. Otherwise, this will consider as a normal Java method. So we need to make that as a data provider method. We need to specify this annotation. Now, what is the purpose of this method is creation of test data and returning the test data. Creation and returning the data. That's the only purpose. And once it is returning the data, so which suppose sometimes you may have multiple test methods. So any test method can receive the data. So I'll show you that. So first let us create a new data provider method. So login data is a name I have given. Inside this, to maintain multiple users and passwords, I will create one two-dimensional array. I can say data, two brackets. Inside this, I will keep all the username and passwords. Inside this two-dimensional array, I can create multiple username and passwords. So how can we create multiple username and password inside the two-dimensional array? Two rows and two columns we can have, right? So this is a two-dimensional array I will create, and multiple username and password I will mention. So here I will put all the users. In the second column, I will put all the passwords. And first row, second row, third row. Okay. So for that, I created one two-dimensional array. So how we can store the data in the two-dimension? I'm not specifying any size, because tomorrow if you want to increase the data or decrease the data, we can do it. So now I just want to have some data in the two-dimensional. I'm hard coding this data. But actually, we need to get this data from the Excel file. For that, we need to write a logic. But here, I'm just hard coding some data. So I already have some dummy, and the data should have a valid or invalid, both we should have. So I'm just having some data here inside this two-dimensional array, right? So this is how we can put data in the two-dimensional array, right? Have you guys remembered the arrays session, arrays class? We have seen this part, how we can store data in the two-dimensional array. So this is actual two-dimensional array. So this is the first row, username and password. This is second row, third row, fourth row, and fifth row. So totally 5 rows we created in the two-dimensional array. And 2 columns. First column is having email addresses, second column is having passwords. And in this, some data is a valid data, some of this invalid data. Okay. So now in the data provider method, we just created a two-dimensional array which contains a data. Now, once you have data in the two-dimensional array, I'm going to return this. I'm going to return two-dimensional array. And when you're returning the string type of data, the return type should be string only. But are we returning a single data or multiple data? Are we returning only one string or multiple strings? Multiple, right? Because array variable I'm passing. Array means what? Which contains the rows and columns. So along with the data type, we should also specify array, because we are returning two-dimensional array of string type. So the return type also should be two-dimensional array of string type. Okay. But sometimes in this data, we can have a different type. For example, sometimes you may have integer and string combination. Sometimes you may have a Boolean. Sometimes you have some other characters. So different kinds of data you can specify in the two-dimensional array. Test data can be anything, right? So instead of keeping string, better to have object. Okay, better to have object, because the data object can have object kind of array can have any type of data. It can hold all kinds of data, right? So better to have object, and even return type also can have object. So this is a normal standard format we can pass. You can still return string, integer, whatever you want. So better to keep object, because tested data can be any type. It allows to store any type of data. So I just created some two-dimensional array which contains some data, and we're returning it. And the return type is what? Object type of an array. So this is another important intake question. So data provider method, what is the return type of data provider method? What is a return type of data provider method? So data provider method always returns two-dimensional array, which can be a string or can be object, can be or any other data type. But most of the times it will return two-dimensional object type of an array. Okay. So this is how we can specify, we can create a data provider method. That's it. Here also, we are not going to write any looping statement for now, because we hard coded all the data. Okay. But in the real scenario, we should not hard code like this. We will get this data from Excel sheet and store in the two-dimensional array. Then we will return it. The process is same. Only thing is, instead of hard coding the data, we will write a small looping statement through which we can get the data from Excel file. So the purpose of data provider method is what? Creating the data, test data, and returning it. That's it. It will not do any testing. It will not interact with any type of applications. It is only preparing the test data and returning the data. That's it. Okay, now this is the data provider method. Fine. Now I want to use this data in our test method. In the login test method, we'll repeat multiple times, right? By taking this particular data. So how it is possible? The first thing is, whenever you create a data provider annotation, we have to give some name to that. There is one attribute called name. Okay. So the tested data, most of the times, 99% of the times we use Excel files, because Excel file is most convenient way to specify the data, because all the rows data will be aligned in the rows and columns in cell format. So it is very convenient and most comfortable and flexible. So that's the reason most of the times we get the data from only Excel sheets. Okay. Sometimes very rare cases, we can get the data from the notepad. We can get the data from the databases tables. If the database contains a table, from that also we can get the data. But ultimately, even if you read the data from the database or notepad or whatever, ultimately we will host the data in the Excel sheet. And through utility file, Excel utility file, we will read data from Excel file. Okay. So properties file also we can use. In the last classes, we have seen how to read data from the properties file, right? Properties files we can use as an alternative. Excel file, properties file, and database. These are the only three options most of the times we use. A database is also very rare case. Okay, why? Because instead of writing the code for database and everything, we can directly export data from the database table to Excel file. In the database itself, we have some predefined options to export the table data in Excel file. So we'll use that approach. So we'll export table data in Excel file, and that Excel file we will use for automation testing, for especially data-driven testing. Okay, even JSON files in API testing, JSON files will play important role. But web testing, JSON files we don't use most of the times. So JSON files, XML files, these two files very popularly used only in API testing. Excel files and properties files. So these two files popularly used in web testing. Remember this point, okay? When you do web testing, data will be maintained properties file in Excel files. When I do API testing, then data will be maintained in the JSON files or in XML files. So that is a combination. All right. So when you create your data provider method, you have to specify one attribute called name. So we need to give some name to the data provider method. Name in the sense, not name of the method. Additionally, we have to give some name to the data provider method. So I'll tell you here, I'll say DP, some name I have given. So why this name is given, we have to give, I'll tell you. So this is the data provider method which we created. I have given some name to this. Now come to the main test method. So how this test method will know the data is provided by the data provider method, because you may have multiple data provider methods also. You may have multiple data provider methods. But in that particular case, how this test login method will know about which data provider method is providing the data. So we need to establish our connection, right? So test method should know from which data provider the data is coming from. For that reason, here in the test annotation, we will pass one more parameter called data provider equal to whatever name we have given to this data provider, the same name we have to provide here. Okay, this is the connection. So now the test login method will know the data is coming from which method? DP. That is our data provider. And if you look at here, this data provider is annotation. This is one of the annotation. Start with uppercase character. And here, this data provider is one of the attribute of the test annotation. So it is starting from the lowercase character. Okay. So here we have to give some name to the data provider, and with the same name, we have to pass it here. So the test login method will know data is coming from DP, which is data provider method, which we already created. Fine. So data provider method will return username and password. In every round of execution, username, email address, and password will be returned. So this particular method also should receive those parameters. How we can receive those parameters? Here, I will create a string email, string password. So two parameter I can specify. Now these two parameters will receive the data from the data provider, and instead of hard coding this data, I will just pass it here. Email, because these are the variables, local variables, email and password. So this particular two parameters will receive email address and password, and it will substitute here and it will do the validation. So data provider method is passing a different type of data, different combinations of data, and our test method will receive the data one after another and do the entire process. For each and every email ID, this script will be executed multiple times. So have you used any looping statement to repetition for this? No, there is no looping statement. there is no looping statement. So data provider, how many inputs it is passing, those many number of times test login method will execute. Okay. Now let us try to execute. So this is must and should. So the name attribute we have to specify for data provider notation. With the same name, we have to refer data provider. Okay. So otherwise, the test login method will don't know which data provider is passing the data. All right. Now let us try to execute. Run as. Just notice how it is executing without having any looping statement. See this? This is my first email address, not matching because it's invalid data I have provided. Now it is taking second input. It is also invalid. Now it is taking another input. I think this is the third one. And this is also invalid. Only with the one combination I put valid data. Okay, now this is valid data. Now it is successfully login. Now again it is taking another data. This is again invalid data. Done. So if you look at the results, so first time it is taking abc@gmail.com test_123. You can see this is the first input. Second time it is taking xyz@gmail.com. This is my second input. Third time john@gmail.com. Next time this is actual valid data which is got passed. And the next time, the last time it is taking this one. This is also failed. See, it is taking all the combinations of data one after another and execution is happen. The same test method is got repeated multiple times. The same test method, which is repeated multiple times with the different sets of data which are passed through data provider method. Okay. So whenever I say index, again, we have to write a looping statement. Here we are not using any looping statement. That is the beauty of the data provider method. That's the main advantage of the data provider method. So here we no need to do any kind of indexing or anything. No index is required, no for loops are required, anything. Just it will return the data from the two-dimensional array. And in the test method, it will read the first input and do everything. Again, take the second input and then do everything. Third input and repeat all the steps. So this test method will repeat multiple times based upon the number of inputs we have passed through data provider method. Here, even though it is an array concept, we no need to use any index. We no need to write any for loop. So that is the main advantage of data provider method. So data provider method will take care of all those things. Repetition, indexing, looping, all those things will be taken care by the data provider method itself. So we no need to bother about that, how exactly it is doing internally. Okay. So how many inputs we are passing here? Those many number of times the test method will execute. Okay. So without using any looping statement, the test method will repeat multiple times with multiple sets of data. So every time you're getting the new email and password from the data provider method and execution will happen. And once it is done, it will take another email and password. Then again, execution will be done. So this is just like a enhanced for loop. In enhanced for loop, we are not putting any condition, initialization, incrementation, nothing, right? How many rows we have in area, those many times automatically it will read one after another. So once the rows are completed, it will stop execution. It is also working in the similar fashion. So it will read first row, execution is done, next row, next row, next row. Once all the rows are completed, then it will stop executing. Okay. So in whichever format we are passing the data, because both are strings here, right? Both are strings. So here both the parameters should be string. So depends upon the type of data, you have to provide the type of variables. The type you should exactly match. Email address is always string. Password is also always string, right? So I provided string here. Suppose tomorrow if you pass some numbers or some other type of data, accordingly you have to change the data type into the parameters. Okay. So based upon the type, it will automatically recognize because earlier we already seen how to call the methods. right? If the method is accepting two string parameters, we need to pass two strings. If the method is accepting two number parameters, then we have to pass two integers. Similarly, here we are passing two strings actually. So the parameters should be also strings. Okay. So everybody's understood about this data provider method, how to create a data provider method and how we can use the data provider method to repeat the test multiple times. Okay. And remember this, the data provider method is always returning two-dimensional array only. Even if you have a 10 columns, 10 inputs, still it will return two-dimensional. Because in the two-dimensional array, we can create n number of rows, n number of columns, right? Two-dimensional array means not only two rows and two columns. It can have n number of rows, n number of columns. So the data can be increased, no problem. Still, it is a two-dimensional array. And most important point you need to remember is this one. Whenever you create a data provider method, the name attribute must be specified, because if you want to refer, suppose this is a test login method, and from where this is getting the data, how this test login method will know which data provider method is providing the data. So that's the reason we have to specify here. Data provider is equal to DP. Okay, for example, if you have a multiple data provider methods and multiple test methods, then how we can handle this? So let us see this example. Let's say I have test method 1, another test method 2, and I have two data provider methods. So this is DP1 and this is DP2, two data provider methods. Okay. Now the name here is the DP1 itself, and here the name is DP2 itself. Now I have two different test methods, two data provider methods, right? So this is a data provider and this is also data provider. So here I have given name attribute equal to DP1. Here also I have given name attribute DP2. Same name we cannot give. Okay. Now in the test method 1, I want to use this particular data provider method. I want to get the data from the DP1. So here what you can say in the test annotation, you can specify. So data provider equal to what? DP1, that you can specify. So this test method 1 will take the data from the data provider 1. So this is how we need to combine. Similarly, test method 2, I want to get the data from the DP2, data provider method 2. So here I can say at the test annotation, here you can specify. So data provider equal to name equal to DP2. Like this you can specify. So now the test method 2 will get the data from the another data provider method. So in single class, you can have multiple test methods, and you can also have multiple data provider methods also. Okay. But in the real-time projects, in the framework, what you will do is, we don't create these data provider methods specific to the class. We will create a separate class which contains only data provider methods. Let's say you can have 5 to 10 data provider methods in one single class. Okay. And you will have a multiple test cases, multiple test case classes. So if you want to use this data provider method in whichever class you want, you can use it. So this is the approach we will follow. So most of the times, why? Because if you create this data provider within one single class, right? So this data provider, I cannot use it for another test, another class. So that's the reason we will make all data provider methods which are required in your project. We'll keep everything in one single class, or which contains only data provider methods that we will refer in multiple classes wherever you want. Okay. And these data provider methods, we don't need to specify static, public, no, nothing. Those access modifiers we never use. And these data provider methods we can directly specify in the data provider parameter. Okay. So in the framework, I will explain more detail how we can specify all the data providers in one single class, how we can use them in multiple classes. So that is again part of the framework that I will show you. Another thing which we have missed here is how data provider get the data from the Excel sheet. So suppose data is there in Excel sheet. So the data provider will get entire data from Excel sheet and store in the two-dimensional array, and that will be returned to the test case. So this entire process we will see in the framework concept. Yes, all the classes can easily recognize data providers from the single class. So based on the names, we can recognize. So that's the reason name is most important. So whenever you create a data provider method, we have to provide the name attribute. So this is mandatory required. This is mandatory required. Okay. So now I'm going to show you few more options in this data provider. So far everybody is clear how we can create a data provider annotation method and how we can refer in the test method, how exactly the test method will repeat multiple times. So the main benefit of data provider is what? Without using any looping statement, we can repeat our test method multiple times. Okay. So my requirement is, suppose I have 5 inputs here and I don't want to pass all 5 inputs to the test method. So as of now, my test method is executing 5 times because I'm passing 5 inputs. But I don't want to repeat my test for all 5 inputs. I want to choose the inputs based upon my choice. For example, my test method, I want to execute only for first input and the last input. Only 2 times I want to repeat. Or I want to execute my test in a test method only for first 3 inputs or for last 3 inputs. So how we can manage it? So that you can manage by adding one more attribute here, comma. In the data provider annotation itself, we can pass one more attribute called indices. Indices. Indices equal to, in the curly brace, you can specify. So how many inputs you want to pass? Let's say first one, this is a 0, right? So this is a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because array index start from 0. So this is a 0, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to pass only first two inputs to the test method. Only 2 times it will execute. So I can say 0, comma 1. Indices 0, comma 1. When I say 0, comma 1, only 0 input and first input. Only these two will be taken. So now my test method will execute only 2 times by taking 2 inputs, only 2 inputs, 0 and 1. Let's execute and see. This is the one more option which is very, very helpful. See, the first input it is taken. My test is failed. This is invalid input. And then it will take another input. This is my second input. And this is also invalid. So this will also should fail. And finally, close my browser. I put wait time. So it is taking most of them. Yeah, now you can see this. So first time abc@gmail.com it is taken, 0 input. Second time xyz@gmail.com is taken, that's the first one. 0 index, 1 index. So it is taking only 2. Both the times it is got failed. Okay, suppose I want to take first one and last one. Okay, suppose I want to take this one and I want to take this one. 0, this is a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0 and 4. These two inputs I want to take. I can say 0, comma 4. So this is not the range actually. So 0, comma 4 means it is not 0 to 4. 0 element and fourth element. Okay. So I say 0, comma 4. Let me remove this wait. So this will take much time. Yeah, it is specific to the index. So now it is taking the first input. Now it is the second input. And both are invalid data. So both the times it will fail. Done. If I look at this, so I've given 0 and 4. 0 is a abc@gmail.com. It is got failed. The last one, johnkennedy@gmail.com. This is also got failed. So by passing indices parameter, we can also specify specific data. So which data you want to pass to the test method, that also we can control. And not only 2, we can put multiple also. So I can pass first one 0, and also I want to pass one valid data. So what is the index of this? 0, 1, 2, 3. So I can pass 0, comma 3, comma 4. 3 inputs, 0, 3, and 4. And third one is a valid one. 0, 3, and 4. 3 specific data I'm passing. So this is my first one. Second, which is passed. Now this is my third one. Third one is also again invalid. So based upon by using indices option, we can also pass whatever inputs you want to pass to the test method. Now you can see this. It is taking 0, which is got failed, and taking this third one, which is passed, and the last one is got failed. Okay. So this is how we can work with the data provider methods. Data provider method. So what is the purpose of data provider method? Which will create test data and also return it to the test method. And test method will receive the data and execute multiple times. Depends upon the number of inputs provided by the data provider method. And the data provider name should be unique. Okay, so this name we should not give to any other data provider method. Suppose tomorrow you created another data provider method like this, and same name, method name anyway should be different, but the name of the data provider also should be different. So I say DP have given here, you can provide DP1, something like this. Range we cannot specify, only the specific values you can specify. The range we cannot specify. Indices representing the specific rows number, row number we can specify, but range we cannot specify. Okay. So everybody is clear so far. Everyone please confirm in the chat box about data provider method. This is a one type of parameterization. Through data provider, we can achieve data-driven testing. And the framework, I will show you the combination of Excel file and data provider method, how we can achieve the data-driven testing. So data provider names, wherever you create data provider method, names are different. Names should be different. Okay, same data provider name you should not give to another data provider method wherever you create. Because we will create all the data provider methods in one class. And everywhere we can refer that. Throughout the project, wherever you want, you can refer that. So because we're creating all the data providers in one single class, data provider names should be different. So when I say DP1, DP2, DP3, I can give a different names. Same name you cannot give. Okay. It will give you the duplication. Fine. So now let us move on to the next type of parameterization, which is also very important. How to can pass parameters from XML file. So normally how we are using XML file so far to run the tests, right? If you want to run single class or multiple classes, we use XML file. XML file is considered as a suite. So in the same XML file, we can provide the data. We can pass some parameters to the test at the runtime. And this approach especially used for parallel testing. We can execute the same test case multiple times. You can execute the same test case on multiple browsers parallelly. So that we will see how we can do this. So this is a step-by-step process. Listen very, very carefully. Parallel testing using XML file. Okay. So first of all, I will create one test case and then I will run through XML file. So that is a prerequisite. Then we will see how we can make it happen parallel. So I will create new class. Okay. So I will name it as param test and finish. So in the param test, I will create few things. So here I will create same. Again, I'm going to create one setup method. First, listen carefully. So if you have any questions, I will take it later. So void setup. Okay, and this method I will execute before class only once. So I can make it as a before class. And in the setup method is taking care of launching the browser application and so on. Later, I will implement the code and then I will write another actual test. So I can say void test logo. One more test method. This is one test method. So this is my test annotation. Also, if you want, I can give priority equal to 1. so that I can create multiple test methods. I will implement this code later. And another method I'm going to create void test title, logo, and title test. This is another test for testing the title. And then here I can say priority equal to 2. So one is for testing the logo. Another test is for testing the title of the home page. And also I will write another test for testing the URL of the page. So I can write another test void test URL. Test URL. So this is another test. Test priority equal to 3. So now totally one method is executing before class, 3 test methods, and finally I will create tear down. So this will close my browser and everything. So this I will execute after class. So this I will execute after class. Okay. So let's try to implement this code. So in the setup for every method, driver is required. So I create driver as WebDriver driver. So at the time of implementation, I'll try to use only Chrome browser, and later we will add another browser. So I'm creating a driver in the setup method, driver equal to, I say Chrome driver. I say Chrome driver. And this will launch my browser, Chrome driver. So as soon as it is launched, the browser, then immediately I will try to launch my application also, driver.get. And here I can pass any type of application. So I can just pass. Okay, so this is a page I'm going to launch. And if you want to put implicit weight here itself, we can put driver.manage timeouts dot implicitly weight duration dot of seconds, so 10 seconds. Okay, so this setup method is responsible for what? Launching the browser, launching the application URL. That's it. Now come to the logo. So in that particular page, I want to verify this logo is present or not. So for that, I'm creating some piece of code. So this is the way I'm capturing the logo element, which is status, and I put one assertion. Assert equals. Here I'm getting status true or false that I will compare with the true. Right? If the status is true, both are matched, so my test method will pass, or else it will fail. Similarly, test title. So if you want to verify the title, also I can put one validation point here. Test title. So here I'm directly getting the driver.get title that I'm comparing with the actual title, expected title. So this will return the actual title of the page that I'm comparing with our expected title. So both directly I put in the assertion. So instead of storing the title in another variable and put that variable here, directly I provided this command driver.get title and compare with our expected title. And if both are equal, then the assertion will make my test method pass. If both are not equal, my test method will fail. Similarly, test URL also, I directly specify test URL. So whatever URL we passed here, the same URL should display here. And how to capture the URL of the page? Which command? Driver.get current URL. Driver.get current URL. So this URL will compare with our expected URL. So this is another validation. So 3 validations: logo presence, title, and URL. So 3 validations I'm doing. And finally, here I can say driver dot close or quit. Okay. So we have implemented everything. So let us try to execute this test, run as TestNG test. So as of now, this test is got created only for Chrome browser. Let me run one more time. So as of now, this test is got created only for Chrome browser. So logo is failed. Why? Because we haven't maximized the page. Let's maximize it. driver dot manage dot window dot maximize. Okay, so let me execute. Run as TestNG test. Okay, still logo is failing. Okay, so we'll see the XPath is correct or not. Okay, so I guess XPath is correct. Okay, we'll do one thing. So here we'll also put thread dot sleep 3 seconds. Okay, so now all three got passed. So all three got passed. So now my test is perfectly working. So the question is why we have not written true in SRT equals where? Can you tell me line number? Which line? 38. Okay, so here we are using assert equals, right? Assert equals method will compare two values. And those two values can be strings, those two values can be Boolean, those two values can be number, anything, right? So driver.getTitle will return which type of data? String. And here we specify the string. So both will compare by the assert equals. So that's the reason here we no need to put true or false. Because here the assert equals method is comparing two string values. And here also same thing. Here assert equals is method comparing two strings. This will also return the string. This is also string. So both will return string. But here assert equals method compare two Boolean values. Why? Because each displayed method is returning a Boolean value, true or false. So that's the reason I put true here. So status value can be true or false, and I put X true here. If both are true, then this method will pass. If both are not true, or if one is true, another and one is false, then this will fail. Okay. So it is not mandatory to put only Boolean values. Assert equals method will accept all kinds of data. So here we are comparing two Booleans. Here we are comparing two strings. Here also we are comparing two strings. Okay. So now all three methods are passing. Now we'll see the next level. We'll go to the next level. So as of now, this particular test param test contains one setup method, three test methods, one after class method. So everything is executing only one browser, that is Chrome browser. Okay. So now what do I want to do is my requirement is setup method is responsible for launching the browser, right? Setup method is responsible for launching the browser. Which type of browser it is launching? Chrome browser it is launching. Now let me run this test through XML file. Okay, so let me create an XML file to run this particular test. So I'm automatically creating this. Go to TestNG, convert to TestNG, and browse it. src test Java and day 45. Okay, now I have created one TestNG.xml file. So if you run this XML file, by default, our test will execute, right? So let me run this XML file. Okay, now, so I have executed my test at the entire class using XML file. So now, first step, so what we have done, we created test case. And second step, created XML file to run the test case. Okay, now the main thing will start. So in the test case, if I go back to the test case, in the setup method, we are launching the Chrome browser. and some application URL, right? But now my requirement is I want to pass the browser name from the XML file. Okay, I want to pass browser name from the XML file. So whichever browser name I passed, my setup method should launch that particular browser. For example, when I pass Chrome here from XML file, my setup method should launch my Chrome browser. When I pass Edge browser from the XML file, my setup method should launch Edge browser. That means I'm going to pass a parameter from the XML file that I want to receive inside the setup method. You can receive in any of these methods, but where exactly it is required? In the setup method is required because browser name we are passing. So we'll see how to pass browser name parameter from the XML file. Then we will see how setup method will receive that parameter at the runtime. Very, very important. So to pass parameter from the XML file inside the classes before classes started, so we need to pass one thing called parameter tag. So we need to add one tag called parameter. Okay, this is the additional tag where we have to specify this before classes. Parameter name equal to browser. Parameter name is equal to browser, that you need to put in a single quote. Parameter is a browser. And what is the value of this browser? Value equal to Chrome. And then close this classes tag, parameter tag. So what exactly we have done is, before starting the classes, we added one more tag called parameter, and two attributes will be there. Name parameter, so name attribute, value attribute. So name attribute is a browser, and the value of the browser is what? Chrome. Okay. Name is a one attribute, value is another attribute. Name attribute is value is what? Browser. And the browser value is what? Chrome. So these are the two attributes we have to specify. So that we are passing Chrome as a parameter. So the browser is what? Chrome. Here the parameter, we can consider this as a variable, and this is the value of the variable. Okay. Browser is a variable. Chrome is a value of the browser variable. So this is how we can pass parameter from the XML file. Now, but how the setup method will receive that parameter from XML file? There should be some mechanism, right? So setup method should know from where I should take the parameter. For that, what we need to do is, in the setup method, you can put here also, we need to put one more type of annotation at the rate parameters. Parameter annotation. This parameter annotation also we need to import from org.testng.annotations. And you can put before class after the parameters or before parameters, no problem. So these two also you can interchange, no issues. So we need to additionally add one the rate parameters annotation. In this, we have to specify in the first curly brace. In the curly brace, we have to specify what is the name of the parameter is browser. The same we have to specify here in the double quotes browser. Okay, now here we are passing browser parameter. So here we need to specify the same variable name. Whatever variable name we have specified, same name we have to specify here. Okay, then whatever the value we are passing as part of the browser, our setup method will receive that in a variable. So here we'll prepare one string parameter, let's say br. Okay, now we are passing parameter from the XML file, and setup method will receive the browser value, which is Chrome, into this variable because we specify the variable here. So whatever value we have assigned to the browser, this value will be captured into this variable br. Okay, this is a process. So whichever parameter name we specified here, the same name we have to pass. Then what will happen? Whatever value is assigned to this variable, the same value will be assigned to the method variable. You can also pass multiple parameters that I will show you. First, we will see for one parameter. Okay. Now, once you get a parameter br, based on this parameter, we have to decide which browser we want to launch. Okay, sometimes I will pass Chrome here. Sometimes I will pass Edge. Sometimes I will pass Firefox. Whichever browser you want, you can pass. But accordingly, we have to launch our browser. But as of now, our script is launching only Chrome browser, right? But we need to modify this. What you need to modify? Keep this code one side. And this we have to decide based on the parameter which we are receiving here. So we will put one switch case statement here. Switch BR. Okay. And this statement we have to execute. When we have to execute this statement, if the BR value is equal to Chrome, then only we have to execute this statement, right? So here I will put one case BR, sorry, case Chrome. This is the way we need to do it. Okay, so if the BR value is equal to Chrome, then do this, launch our Chrome browser. Okay, and then break. Suppose if my BR value is equal to Edge, then what we should do? Driver equal to new Edge browser, Edge driver. We have to launch and then break. So Edge driver we have to import. Suppose the browser name is equal to Firefox. Browser name is equal to Firefox. So then I should launch driver equal to new Firefox driver and then break. Okay, so I can specify whatever browsers I have in your system. Suppose if this browser name is invalid, suppose I pass some invalid browser name or some other browser name other than these three. So then what we should do? Default block will execute. So in the default block, we specify some message system.out.println invalid browser, and after that rest of the statements will as well execute, right? So our switch case block will decide which browser will be launched based on the parameter value. Okay, suppose if the Chrome browser is launched, then rest of the code will be executed on the Chrome browser. All the tests will also execute on the same Chrome browser. Suppose if the switch case is decided Edge browser, then rest of the code will be executed on the Edge browser. So the whole thing will be decided by the switch case statement. Now there is a problem in this. For example, if I pass some invalid browser, so all three not matching, then what will happen? In the default block, system.out.println invalid browser, it will say invalid browser, perfectly fine. Then what will happen? Rest of the code will execute, right? But here it needs driver. And rest of the tests also will execute. Everywhere the driver is needed. So if you are passing invalid browser, it is not possible to create the browser, right? So we should not execute the rest of the statements. So if you're passing invalid browser, immediately use one keyword called return. Return. So what is the return keyword will do is the return keyword will completely exit from this test. It will completely exit from the not only switch case block. The break command will just exit from only switch block, but rest of the code will execute. But what the return will do, return will exit from the entire method, complete method. So the rest of the code will not be executed. So if the browser value is valid, then only it will create a browser and rest of the code will be executed. If the browser is invalid, then we are returning it. Means we are exiting from the entire method. So this is something new you have to remember. Earlier we haven't discussed this. Okay. So now what we have done here, BR is a variable, just a variable which will store the browser name passed through XML file. So from the XML file, we are passing the Chrome, right? So that we are storing in the BR. And if the BR value is equal to Chrome, then launching the Chrome browser. If the BR value is equal to Edge, then launching the Edge driver. If the BR value is equal to Firefox, then launching the Firefox driver. If the BR value is equal to something else, we are saying the invalid browser and exit from the code. Okay. Till here, everybody is clear. So we are passing the parameter browser name from the XML file. We are receiving here. Based on that, we are launching the browser. Okay. So this is a step number 2. So passed browser name parameter from XML file and received in setup method. So this is the third step. So pass the browser name parameter from XML file and received in the setup method. So setup method, why setup method is received? Why can't other test methods can receive? Other test methods also can receive, but the setup method is responsible for launching the browser, right? That is the reason we are receiving this parameter inside the setup method. Okay. Now let us test this code. So for now, I'm passing the Chrome browser. Okay. Okay. So okay. For example, yeah. Sometimes you may pass this in the lowercase character, uppercase character. In that case, this will not match, right? If you pass in uppercase character, so this will not match. Or if you pass, suppose here you are comparing uppercase, but here it is passing lowercase, then it will not match. So to avoid that case sensitivity, what I will do is I will convert this entire BR into lowercase. Okay. So obviously everything is a lowercase, definitely it will match. Even though if you pass in uppercase character here from XML files, here it will convert into the lowercase and match will happen, no problem. So you can pass this value either uppercase characters or lowercase characters. Now let me run XML file. So now our test case is totally depends on XML file. Yes or no? Our test case is totally depends on XML file because our setup method required our browser. Without browser parameter, it cannot launch any browser, right? So can we run the test case alone without XML file? Can we run test case alone without XML file? No. If you run this, what will happen? Observe. I'm running the test case without having XML file. I'm directly running the test. Earlier we have run it, but this time it will give you an exception. What is an exception? Parameter browser is required by before class method setup, but it has been taken optional or defined. What it is clearly saying, to execute the setup method, browser parameter is required that you are not getting. Why? Because we are not run through XML file. Okay. So now the test case, entire test case is depends on XML file. Only through XML file, we have to run the test case. Now I'm passing Chrome browser here. Let's run it. Run as TestNG suite. So as our expectation, it will launch my Chrome browser. This is my Chrome browser. Then all tests will be executed on the Chrome browser and it is got closed. So the socket exception comes from this close. Let me use quit command. So go to XML once again. So as of now, it is launching my Chrome browser and all the tests will be executed on the Chrome browser. Perfectly fine. So all three tests got executed and Chrome browser. Now let me change the another browser. See, instead of Chrome, I will pass Edge. Okay, so I'll pass Edge browser. So it should launch my Edge browser there. So let me execute my XML file once again. So this time I'm passing Edge. So this is my Edge browser and executing all the tests on my Edge browser and perfectly pass. So it is launched in my Edge browser. Perfectly fine. So let us pass another browser, Firefox. So I never prefer Firefox because it is very, very slow browser. So most of the times test cases will fail because of instability. So most of the times prefer to use either Chrome browser or Edge browser. Safari is also fine if you're working on Mac. So I've saved Firefox here, but I don't have Firefox browser on my system, I guess. So do we have this? Okay, it is automatically created. See, it is launched my Firefox. This is my Firefox browser. Done. So perfectly fine, right? So whichever
parameter I'm passing, whichever browser I'm passing, my tests are executing on that particular browser. So with this, what we have achieved? Cross-browser testing we have achieved. The same test case we are able to execute on multiple browsers just by passing the parameter. Now, let's go to the next step, next level. Whenever I want to run my test on specific browser, I'm passing the parameter. When I pass Chrome, my test is executing on the Chrome browser. When I pass Edge, my test is executing on the Edge browser and so on. So my requirement is, I don't want to pass this parameter every time. Okay, but I want to execute my test on 3 browsers, one after another. I don't want to change this parameter manually. I don't want to change this parameter every time. Chrome, Edge, Firefox. I don't want to write this every time. But still, I want to execute my test case on Chrome browser, then it will Edge browser, and then Firefox. One after another, it should automatically execute sequentially. Then how we can make it happen? Manually, I don't want to change this parameter every time. So then what you can do is, you can create one more test entry. Okay, so this is one thing. This is one test entry, right? This will execute on the Chrome browser. Now I can make another test entry, 2 more entries. And here I can pass Edge browser. Here I can pass Firefox browser. Okay, because I have created 3 tests, the test name should be different. So here I'm changing the name. I'll name it as a Chrome test. And here I will name it as a Edge test. And here I will name it as a Firefox test. Okay. Now I made 3 entries, 3 test entries. So here this will execute on the Chrome browser. This will execute on the test Edge browser. This will execute on the Firefox browser. So one test, we are executing one class, we are executing on 3 different browsers by creating multiple test entries. Okay. Now let us run the XML file. I'm not changing anything, just I'm running the XML file. Run as TestNG. So this is sequential execution. So one after another. First Chrome browser. Once it is completed, then it will launch Edge browser. So now it is completed. Then it is launched my Edge browser. And once it is completed, then it will launch Firefox browser. So Firefox is always slow. I don't recommend to use. So this is my Firefox browser. So now we are able to achieve the sequential execution. Sequential execution. If you look at the test suite execution part, see here, first Chrome browser is executed, all 3 test methods. On Edge browser, 3 test methods are executed. On Firefox, again, 3 test methods are executed. Perfectly fine, right? So this is called sequential execution. So in the 4th steps, what we have achieved, I will create all the steps one by one. So in the 4th step, execute the test case on Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. So Chrome, Edge, Firefox. I'm taking 3 browsers, Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. This is called serial execution. Step number 4. Executed our test case on Chrome, Firefox, and Edge browser. This is sequential, or we can say serial execution. Serial execution. Okay. So far everything is clear. So first we have created a new test case and run through XML file. Then we passed browser parameter. URL also we can pass. I will show you later. So we have passed browser name from the XML file to setup method. Then we have executed the test case on 3 browsers in the serial execution, or which is a sequential execution. So sequential execution is nothing. We just make another entry of the test. So earlier we have only one test entry in the XML file. We make another 2 entries and we just change the browser name. Here Chrome, here it is Edge, here it is a Firefox. Just we change the browser. So first time this will execute on the Chrome browser. Second time the same test will execute on the Edge browser. Third time same test will be executed on the Firefox browser. Okay. And when you create a multiple test, the test name attribute should not be same. So that's the reason I have changed it. Here I say Chrome test, here I say Edge test, here I say Firefox test. That's it. So for everything is clear how we can achieve the serial execution on multiple browsers. Cross-browser testing with serial execution we have achieved. Yes. So multiple test tags are needed if you want to execute the test on multiple browsers. Okay. If you want to execute the test on multiple browsers without changing parameter manually. Earlier we have changed the parameter. I put Chrome first, then I put Edge, then I put Firefox. Instead of changing this parameter every time, I can make another 2 entries. And here I can say Chrome, here I can say Edge, here I can say Firefox. So 3 times the test will execute on 3 different browsers. So this is a concept. Okay. So multiple test tags are required to run tests on multiple browsers. Now let us achieve the parallel execution. So now currently all 3 are executing in serial ways, one after another. Now how we can make them as a parallel? Very simple. What we need to do is in the suite level, all the tests are there, right? So test 1, test 2, test 3. So these 3 tests I want to execute parallelly. All 3 tests, I want to execute them parallelly. So what I should do is go to the suite level. Here, you need to add one parameter, that is parallel. Parallel equal to tests. Parallel equal to tests. So this parameter makes parallel execution. So these 3 tests will be executed parallelly. So all 3 browsers will launch at the same time and test also will be executed at the same time. So this parameter will make our test parallel. And one more important thing, this parallel option we can also use at the test level also. Suppose in the test, I have a multiple classes. Let's say I have multiple classes like this. Now I want to execute all these classes parallelly. Then you can specify this parallel test at the test level also. But in this case, you have to say classes. Okay. So if I use parallel equal to test, then test will execute parallel. But inside the test, if I use parallel equal to classes, then these classes will execute parallel. Everybody getting my point? But most of the times, we don't prefer to use parallel class execution. Okay. So we prefer to use only test will parallel. Why? Because when you run the classes parallelly, if there is any dependency, they will definitely fail. If there is no dependency, that's fine. It will work and pass, execute parallelly. But if there is any dependency, definitely it will fail. So most of the times we just avoid this part. We say parallel only test. We only test, we will execute parallel. Okay, this is one parameter. And one more thing. Can you see the thread count here? Thread count. I'll come to that point. Hold on. Thread count you can see, right? So what is a thread count is representing? Thread count for test is optional. It's not mandatory. I can remove here and I'll put this thread count at suite level. Okay, I'll put the thread count at the suite level and the test level. I can just remove this. Now let us understand what is the thread count, why it is required, what is the number I can specify. So thread count is nothing but at the runtime, it will create multiple threads. For example, let me explain this concept. This is basically related to Java threading concept, which is implemented in the as part of TestNG. So let me tell you simple example. Let's say I have a test 1, test 2, test 3 in my XML file. 3 test entries I have in XML file. Okay. When you run this XML file, suppose I have some memory. By default, XML file, when you run XML file, only one thread will be created. That means one process will be created in the memory. Let's say this is called thread. Thread, or we can call it a process. Okay. Now, when I run them sequentially, one after another. So first test one will execute in this thread, and after completion, then it will take another test. After completion, it will take another test. So same thread will be used for multiple tests, one after another. Here, there is no problem, right? So when you come to the parallel testing, again, I have a two test methods, test3 and test3. If we have only one thread, the problem is it will can hold only one process at a time. It can execute only one test at the time. So if you want to make them parallelly, we have to also increase the number of threads. We should also increase the number of threads. Only if you have only one thread, even though if you put parallel equal to test tag, it will go to the sequential execution. Okay, why? Because it will create only one thread by default. Suppose if you created two threads, thread count equal to 2, then what happens? It will allocate two memory locations, and T1 will execute here, T2 will execute here parallelly. Suppose one of them is become free, then another one will occupy it. That means if I have only one thread, execution will be very slow. If I have a multiple thread, execution will be very fast. Okay. So if you have thread count 2, 2 memory locations will be created. If you have thread count 5, 5 locations will be created. Okay. Suppose if you have created thread count 3, so T3 will be allocated here, T2 and T1. All three we can execute parallelly without any disruption. Okay. But how much value we need to specify? How many threads are required officially? 2 to 5 is enough. Okay. Maximum 2 to 5. So don't go beyond 5. Below 2 is not necessary because by default thread count is 1 only. If you remove the thread count value in XML file, by default it will take 1. So 1 is not necessary put. At least 2, minimum 2, maximum 5. So if we have 50 cases or 100 test cases, still 2 to 5 are enough. Maximum 5 are enough. But if you increase more than 5, can we increase? Yes, you can increase it. But you will find some side effects. So what are those side effects? If you have, suppose 100 test cases, you are running path. You created 10 threads. So if you keep on increasing the number of threads, this will automatically reduce the performance of your code. Reducing the performance is nothing but what? Whatever memory you have in your computer, it will take a lot of memory. It will occupy a lot of memory. As soon as you're increasing the number of threads, this will automatically occupying a lot of memory on the other side. So obviously that will also causing the performance poorness. So that is the reason we should not go beyond 5. 5 is acceptable. Okay. So 2 to 5. If you have just 5 to 10 test cases, 2 is more than enough. 2 is more than enough. If you have 50 or 100 test cases, then up to 5 you can go, but don't go beyond 5. Okay, if you go beyond 5, again you will face some instability issues because of memory slowdown, performance will be reduced. So you can find some instability issues. The test cases will fail frequently, even if you increase a more thread count. So it should be moderate value between 2 to 5. You understood what is the thread count? Why it is needed? So basically we are giving another some extra locations to run our test. If you have only one test, no need of thread count. But if you have multiple tests, that too when you run parallelly, definitely we have to specify the thread count. So whenever you do parallel testing, definitely we have to specify the thread count. Yes. Basically, we can say number of locations or number of processes or number of threads we can say. Instance is a different word, which we should not use it here. Okay. So instance in that sense, a duplication. Here we are not running any duplicates. Test 1 is different, test 2 is different, test 3 is different. So all three we are running in the corresponding memory locations. So I can say thread count equal to 5, or you can 2 or whatever you want. So parallel equal to test. When I add this parameter at the suit level, then all tests will be executed parallelly. But still, there is a difference in fraction of seconds that we cannot notice. Okay, there is some difference in the fraction of seconds, because if you have n number of, let's say if you have 150 test cases, you will see a lot of difference. So what is the advantage of running tests parallelly? Do you have any advantage? Serial execution, parallel execution. Any advantage which we have when you run tests through parallel execution? Any advantage? Why we need to go with parallel testing? Why it is needed? Yes, it will reduce a lot of time. For example, I have test 1, test 2, test 3. Test 1 take, let's say, 2 seconds of time. Test 2 take another 2 seconds of time. Test 3 take another 2 seconds of time. If I execute them serially, how much of time it is taken? Totally 6 seconds. Right? If I execute them parallelly, then what happens? T1 and T2, T3. So it will take 2, 2, 2 in the same parallel way. So ultimately, within 2 seconds, we are able to finish all the execution. It is very faster, reducing the time. So you will notice this difference time only if you have a more number of test cases. If you have a 50 to 100 test cases, you can see a lot of difference. It reduces a good amount of time. But if you have just 2, 3, 5 test cases, you won't see much difference between serial execution and parallel execution. Okay, so remember this. So let's try to run it and see whether it is running parallelly or not. So we already added the parallel equal to test. Let's try to execute. Run as, and it will go very faster. So we cannot see all 3 instances parallelly. So what I will do is I will increase this timeout as a 5 seconds so that we can see all 3 browsers parallel execution at one shot. So let me run as TestNG suite. Firefox will slowly load it. So, but rest of them will go parallel. So this is one browser. This is another browser. Sorry. This is another browser. And now this is another browser. 3 browsers launched parallelly, but Firefox is obviously execution is very, very slow. So it will complete execution little bit slow. Now we can see the execution wise. First Edge browser is got executed. So it will take randomly. Okay, sometimes it will take Edge browser first. Sometimes it will take Chrome browser. Sometimes it will take Firefox. It depends upon the speed and availability of the memory. So all 3 tests are got executed parallelly. So we can see Edge test, Chrome test, Firefox, all 3 got executed. So let me run one more time. Run as test engines. All 3 browsers at a time you can see. So this is one browser. This is another browser. See 2 browsers, and this is third browser. See, one is Firefox, one is Chrome, one is Edge. So Firefox, Edge, Chrome completed very faster, but Edge is Firefox is a little bit slow. Okay, but all of them parallelly loaded, parallel execution is happened. So this is how we can achieve the parallel testing. If you remove this parameter, sequentially execute, serial execution will happen. If I put this parameter, parallel execution will happen. Okay, so everybody's understood. So the last point. So after execution, then we can make them parallel by adding one more parameter. Step number 5. Execute test case on Chrome and Edge parallel execution. Same Firefox. And if you do not have Firefox, no problem. You can leave it. You can try Chrome and Edge browsers. So step number 1, we created a new test case. Then we run through XML file, just a normal execution. And then we passed browser name parameter from XML file to setup method. Then we executed Chrome, Firefox, and Edge in serial execution. How we can execute serial execution? By making multiple test entries. Now we executed the same on 3 different browsers, parallel execution is happened. Suppose if you want to pass some more parameters. So as of now, I'm passing only browser name as a parameter here. Only browser name I'm passing. Suppose I want to pass the URL also, application URL. So then what you can do, you can make another entry. You can make another parameter like this. And here the name is, I can say URL, and the value you can put here. And what is the whatever URL we are putting here, the same URL, I will pass from the XML file. Okay. And the same parameter I will pass for another test also. So this is the same parameter I will add here. Order is not important. Suppose if you pass first URL, then browser, that is also fine. So here I'm passing one parameter, and here also I'm passing one more parameter. URL and browser, both are passing. Now we are passing two parameters. Now we need to receive two parameters. In the setup method, browser, comma, URL. And here also we need two parameters, string URL. And this URL, we have to pass it here. So instead of hard coding this URL, I'm just replacing the URL. That's it. That is up to you, okay? Your requirement. If you want to pass URL, you can pass it, or else you can ignore it, no problem. I just want to show you, if you want to pass multiple parameters, how we can pass. For that reason, I'm taking URL is another parameter. Suppose you are doing a login test, you need username and password. Then you can pass username and password, two parameters from the XML file, like that. Okay, so if you want to pass two parameters, you can just write a two parameters tags in the XML file. Here, two parameters you need to specify, and two variables also you need to specify. And whatever URL I'm getting here, that I'm replacing here. Okay, here this URL is actually coming from XML file. Earlier we have hard coded the URL, but this time we capture the URL from the XML file and put it here. So let's go to XML file once again and then run it one more time. So this time we are taking browser name along with the URL also as a parameters. So this is one browser. This is another browser. This is another browser. Totally three browsers are launched parallelly. Done. So this time we also got a URL as a parameter. So multiple parameters also we can pass XML file through XML file by just adding multiple parameter tags. Okay, so everybody's understood now. So if you don't want to pass URL, you can don't pass. Just directly specify in the test itself. No need. So it decides based upon the test case, how you have written the test case. Based upon your requirement, you need to choose the parameters. You need to decide how many parameters are required for the test. Can we pass from the XML file or not? So that you need to decide. Because as you said, this is not necessary actually, because for all the tests, URL is the same, right? URL is same, but browser is different. I want to run the same test on multiple browsers, so I need to pass multiple browser names dynamically. That is relevant. But URL is same, right? If you launch any type of browser, URL is same, right? So it doesn't make any sense if I pass URL through XML file. But just I have shown you, if you want to pass some other URL, some other parameter, how we can pass. So for that, I have taken this example, but actually URL is not much relevant. So everybody's understood. Please confirm in the chat box how we can do parallel testing using XML file, which is very, very, very important concept. Again, this will repeat in the framework concept. In the framework, once we decide the framework, then I will show you how we can do data-driven testing using data provider orientation with the combination of Excel sheet. And also we will see how we can do the parallel testing, how we can execute multiple test cases on multiple browsers and parallelly. So we achieve cross-browser testing at the same time parallel execution. So these are all concepts. So just try this and practice this today. And tomorrow we'll discuss some more topics from TestNG. I will share all the files and do step by step. Okay, directly don't jump to the parallel execution. First create a test case, then run through XML file, then pass browser name as parameter and see whether it's working properly or not. And then do the serial execution by adding multiple test entries and then try to run them parallelly. So if you do step by step practice, you will not be confused. Everything will be more clear. So don't directly copy paste my code. You yourself do it first. And if you block somewhere, if you're stuck somewhere, then refer my video and the example, then continue with that. All right. So that's all for today's session. I will stop here and tomorrow we will continue.